The House will be in order. For what purpose does the gentleman from the state of New Jersey, my friend, seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's great to see you up there in the chair. Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 5856 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 5856, a bill to reauthorize the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000 and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Smith, and the gentlewoman from North Carolina, Ms. Manning, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey.
I thank the Speaker. I ask unanimous consent, Mr. Speaker, that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent to introduce into the record an exchange of letters with other committees of referral on this bill.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, more than 20 years ago, the U.S. Congress approved and the President signed historic legislation that I authored, known as the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000, a comprehensive whole-of-government initiative to combat sex and labor trafficking in the United States and around the world. The TVPA created a bold new domestic and international anti-human trafficking strategy and established numerous new programs to protect victims, prosecute traffickers, and to the extent possible, prevent human trafficking in the first place, what we call the 3 Ps. Though it's hard to believe now, the TVPA was met with a wall of skepticism and opposition, dismissed by many as a solution in search of a problem. For most people at that time, including some lawmakers, the term trafficking applied almost exclusively to drugs and weapons, not to human beings. Reports of vulnerable persons, especially women and children, being reduced to commodities for sale were often met with surprise, incredulity, or indifference. The bill was finally signed into law on October 28, 2000, and within a year after enactment, no one was arguing anymore that the Trafficking Victims Protection Act's integrated 3P strategy, prevention, protection for victims, and prosecution of the traffickers, was flawed, unworkable, unnecessary, or counterproductive. The TVPA included several sea-change criminal code reforms, including treating as a victim and not a perpetrator of a crime anyone exploited by a commercial sex act who had not attained the age of 18, and anyone older where there was an element of force, fraud, or coercion. The TVPA radically reformed the U.S. Criminal Code to authorize asset confiscation, as well as jail sentences of up to life imprisonment. Thousands of human traffickers have been prosecuted and jailed pursuant to the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, including, although he never came to trial, all charges brought against Jeffrey Epstein. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, the number of persons prosecuted for human trafficking more than doubled from 2011 to 2021, from 729 persons to 1,672 persons, respectively. Among its many provisions, the Act also created the President's Interagency Task Force to monitor and combat trafficking in persons, the U.S. State Department's Trafficking in Persons Office, the annual TIP report, and I encourage my colleagues to look at it and to read it, at least when they're traveling especially, or meeting with delegations from other countries. Read the TIP report. Find out where that country that you're going to visit or whose lawmakers or diplomats you're going to be meeting, where they stand in terms of what they're doing with regards to trafficking. It also calls for serious and sustained efforts to eliminate human trafficking. If they don't, and if they really have a horrific record, they get put on Tier 3 for egregious violator, and they're subject to sanctions. Over the years, I've authored 4 additional laws, including in 2003, 2005, 2016, that was the International Megan's Law, and in 2019, the Frederick Douglass Trafficking Victims Prevention and Protection Act. And we are reauthorizing that and the underlying TVPA today. Today, the House considers a 5-year reauthorization named after and in honor of the great abolitionist and civil rights leader, Frederick Douglass. Special thanks are in order to our original co-sponsors, including Chairman McCall, my subcommittee ranking member, Susan Wild, as well as Kathy Manning, who's managing over on the Democratic side tonight. I thank her. Ann Wagner, Henry Cuellar, Joe Wilson, Amada Radwagen, and Dr. Michael Burgess, all original co-sponsors of the bill. I thank you, and I say again a special thank you to the extraordinarily talented staffers, including Mary Vigil to my left, who did an amazing job on this, Janice Kaguyutan, never get it right. Thank you, Janice, for your work. Thank you to Mary Noonan, Doug Anderson, and survivors Bella Haluki and Robert Lung, who also provided tremendous insights. A heartfelt thanks to the over 20 organizations that have provided insights, recommendations, and have endorsed this legislation. Terry Fitzpatrick, for example, director of the Alliance to End Slavery and Trafficking. It's a consortium of various groups. He has said, on behalf of them, the U.S. has the world's most comprehensive governmental effort to fight human trafficking, and this law is the reason why. It is the blueprint for comprehensive action at home and abroad. Updating and reauthorizing the act is essential to maintaining America's leadership. The United States Conference of Catholic Bishops strongly endorsed the legislation and asked Congress to approve the measure without further delay, quote unquote, and went on to say we must unite to identify and address conditions that lead to human trafficking and promote efforts to prevent it, said Bishop Mark Zeitz. And a great big thank you to Kenneth Morris. Now, this man is the great-great-grandson of Frederick Douglass and the great-great-grandson of Booker T. Washington. He runs a group called the Family Initiatives, and he has been of such a great source and an inspiration for this legislation. He has said that this legislation, named after his ancestor, emphasizes education and resilience as effective means to prevent human trafficking among children, prevent re-trafficking of survivors, and provide support and hope to survivors in their journeys towards self-empowerment. Mr. Morris goes on to say, in the words of my great-great-grandfather and great American abolitionist Frederick Douglass, quote, enslavement is a scourge on humanity, and that to expose it is to kill it. Slavery is one of the monsters of darkness to whom the light of truth is death. Expose slavery, he goes on to say, and it dies. This wisdom, he goes on to say, is in the form of human trafficking, which is modern-day slavery. Since 2008, he points out that they have helped and trained 60,000 adults and 500,000 children in the skills of keeping themselves safe from harm. This legislation has provisions in it to make our young people situationally aware from elementary and secondary school so that everyone knows what the traffickers do, how horrible their schemes are, their nefarious organizations, what they do with drugs and other ways of enticing young people, and next thing you know, they are trafficked and they're in modern-day slavery. Let me also point out that the bill seeks to promote, as I said, situational awareness. It also authorizes survivors' employment, housing, and education programs, authorizes a program for housing. You know, one of the things we find is that a woman or a man, but most are women, are liberated. Where do they go? They need help. And we do have programs in existence. This will redirect some of those funds to help them get a house, a home, so that they are less likely and less vulnerable to being re-trafficked. It makes scalable programs through training of the trainers in collaboration with Internet Crimes Against Children's Task Force. It encourages the use of prevention efforts to include accessible, age-appropriate, and trauma-informed approaches for USAID beneficiaries, and further incorporates counter-trafficking efforts across our development portfolio. We know for a fact that it is a problem in developing countries where sometimes even the peacekeepers engage. I had hearings and worked on, and there was just another one the other day that John James chaired about peacekeepers. The fact that sometimes they become the ones who engage in trafficking and abuse young people. It streamlines statutory language for Tier 2 watch lists, reauthorizes the state office to monitor and combat trafficking. There's also language in about organ harvesting. Last March, we passed legislation to provide, to really combat this horrible organ harvesting debacle, where especially China are killing average age 28 years old in whether it be Falun Gong or Uyghurs to steal their hearts and lungs and livers, especially livers. And unfortunately, it's a big business for the Chinese Communist Party. So we put language in this that will be part of the TIP report. It also reauthorizes the International Megan's Law. Now, what's that? Back in 1994, a little girl who used to be in my district, Hamilton Township, New Jersey, was killed by a convicted pedophile out of prison, lived across the street, and buried her after horribly abusing her. Well, every state, every one of our states has a Megan's Law, and they work really, really well. We found that many of the convicted pedophiles get a passport and travel, child sex tourism. So we wrote a law, I did it, and took 8 years to get passed. 3 times passed in the House. Senate wanted nothing to hear about it, but it finally got passed. And that says a number of things, including that before they travel, these individuals have to register with the U.S. government, and we inform the country of destination that they soon will be coming. If they want to say, no, you can't come in, well, that's exactly what happens. They don't get to go to that country. It's run by the Angel Watch Center. They do a magnificent job, and I want to thank them. The law is working. According to Homeland Security Investigations, HIS, the U.S. government has notified foreign governments of the planned travel of 27,679 covered sex offenders, and it has not been in effect that long. As late January, 9,489 individuals who were convicted of sex crimes against children were denied, I say again, denied entry into those nations. So we've taken the secrecy out of traveling to some extent, and these countries are empowered to say, look who's coming. You're not getting in to abuse our children. So we also put language in it, frankly, that allows for stamping the passport to make sure that if they do lie and they get in, it's on the passport they are a covered sex offender. I have much more to say, but I reserve the balance of our time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of H.R. 5856, and I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentlelady is recognized.
I was proud to help introduce this bipartisan bill alongside my good friend and one of the colleagues with whom I've worked closest in Congress, Representative Chris Smith of New Jersey, as well as my dear friend, Representative Susan Wild, to reauthorize the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000. Congress has reauthorized this important bill several times in 2003, 2006, 2008, 2013, and most recently in 2019. This legislation serves as a reminder that Congress has long played and will continue to play a critical role in advancing U.S. interests and global efforts to combat and eliminate human trafficking. I want to thank Representative Smith for having authored the first modern U.S. anti-trafficking bill and its subsequent reauthorizations, and for his tireless work fighting to do the right thing to protect those who have been dehumanized by forced labor and sexual exploitation. We are deeply grateful for your leadership. We are also proud to partner with you not only in elevating this issue, but also in saving lives and protecting vulnerable people around the world, which is what this legislation has done. Today, we build on the successes and the lessons learned over the last decades. This bill is a 5-year reauthorization of important counter-trafficking programs, and it also modernizes vital prevention, protection, and prosecution tools to eradicate this billion-dollar criminal enterprise and save countless lives from this egregious violation of human rights. This bill saves lives, and it is a bipartisan cause. It's not about politics. This is about doing the right thing. It is about our common humanity, and it is about protecting those who have been subjected to unspeakable crimes. I am very proud to support it, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady from North Carolina reserves. Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Reserve the balance of our time. I'm ready
Gentleman.
to close when my friend and
Gentleman
colleague.
reserves.
And
I'm
I
ready
do
to
thank you
close.
for her comments tonight.
I yield
Gentlelady from
myself
North
as
Carolina is
much time as I may consume for the purpose of closing.
Gentlelady is recognized.
The Frederick Douglass Trafficking Victims Prevention and Protection Reauthorization Act builds on the decades of efforts to combat human trafficking, modernizing prevention, protection, and prosecution tools. This 5-year reauthorization of counter-trafficking programs will be critical for U.S. efforts around the globe to eliminate the human trafficking industry. I want to thank again my good friend, Representative Chris Smith, for his lifetime of work on this issue. It has made a real difference, and this reauthorization will continue to make a difference for years to come by building on the lessons learned since he first introduced the first modern anti-trafficking bill in 2000. I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting H.R. 5856, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman from North Carolina yields. Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my good friend and colleague. We have worked together on so many human rights issues, including combating anti-Semitism and other important human rights issues and trafficking. She was a star when we had our hearings on this, and I want to thank her for her eloquent defense of the victims, as well as trying to stop the perpetrators of these horrible crimes. You know, at a congressional hearing, and that's one of the ones I'm talking about right just now with my good friend and colleague that I chaired last May, a woman by the name of Gina Cavallo, an amazing, courageous woman from my home state of New Jersey, told us how she suffered unspeakable violence, including rape, beatings, coercive drug abuse, and other torture as her traffickers sold her like a commodity from one buyer to the other. She testified, and this is only a part of her testimony, but it goes right to the heart of what we're talking about. She testified it's so critical that survivors are heard. And she said that the Frederick Douglass Act is a direct result of listening, and we listened to her and other human trafficking victims, and that's much of what we have here tonight has been informed by their insights. Gina Cavallo told us that she was a survivor of domestic violence and childhood abuse. That experience as a child led me, this is her talking now, to a place where I felt ashamed, unloved, rejected. It also led to me being trafficked. Force, fraud, and coercion, she goes on to say, were all used by someone who pretended to be my friend, but ultimately abducted me into being trafficked. For nearly 2 years, from the age of 18, I was prostituted and sold to the highest bidder and raped over and over and over again. She went on, my identity was taken, and I was given a new name. Sleep deprivation, threats of violence, pornography, drugs, and food were all used as punishment and reward, leading to my traffickers taking complete psychological control over me. Does this sound like anything that a young person dreams of for their future? Being stripped and robbed of your peace of mind and of your body, your humanity, your dignity, and your respect. I became, she goes on to say, a commodity to be used for others' gain. But I often blame myself for the situation because I believed it was my fault. And I've heard, and I know my good friend Karen has heard this as well as other members of this chamber, so often the trafficking victims say, oh, it's my fault. It's not. They have been coerced, deceived, and drugged often into this terrible, terrible trafficking situation. She goes on to say, as a victim, I was taught to distrust my family and friends, and especially law enforcement. The more they isolated me, the more fear I felt, and the more control they gained, which is very intentional. It took decades for me to identify that I was a victim. I learned through counseling and by my continuous healing journey that what happened to me wasn't my fault. As a victim, I was left with a lifetime sentence, ruined relationship, addiction, hospital visits, suicide attempts, lack of jobs and education, and also left with shame and fear. In her testimony, Gina said, but what you especially can do as lawmakers is to ensure that every aspect of your work to end human trafficking that you put forward mandates widespread survivor-informed and trauma-informed training. She goes on, we need to create a safer country where people can come forward without stigma to reveal their experiences. No one should feel the double victimization of being trafficked, as well as feeling that they stay silent because of shame, fear, and not feeling safe. Today, Gina is a brave survivor with an indomitable spirit. She works in coalitions, including the New Jersey Coalition to End Human Trafficking and others, and speaks to many school assemblies. And believe me, when she speaks, those students listen. So in writing the Frederick Douglass Act, we listened to her and others, and we were moved, and of course it helped us to get it right. And again, that situational training that's at the core of this particular bill to make sure that our young people, I say to all my colleagues, there are curricula out there, and Frederick Douglass's foundation has curricula. Go to your schools, go to your police departments and say, please, will you take a look at this and have a day or two or more of training so that the young people, elementary and secondary age, and it also applies to college and higher education, that they know how to defend themselves. And if they see a friend at risk, to intervene quickly before the traffickers get them on drugs and hurt them severely. I see we're pretty much out of time before the end of this time period, so I do yield back the balance of our time, and I urge a yes vote on this legislation.
The gentleman yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 5856 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the two-thirds being in the affirmative, this gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition.
On that, I request the yeas and nays.
Yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 9 of Rule 20, this 15-minute vote on the motion to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 5856 as amended will be followed by 5-minute votes on the motion to reconsider House Resolution 863 and adoption of House Resolution 863 if ordered. This will be a 15-minute vote.